pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there any vocation?
Marshal said.
Motion made, second, about the agenda.
Mr. Kimball?
Yes.
Mike Noel?
Yes.
Carolina?
Yes.
Anna Schultz?
Yes.
Jim Ashford?
Okay. Some new business. Parent tax. Don't know, I know there were PDF to you guys. And it's, have you read them at all? Any of the elements? Basically what it is, we can get a small portion of the tax that's charged.
Could you speak up?
What's that?
I can hardly hear you.
We can get a small percentage of the tax that's charged every time a purchase is made. With the people, from the people that live within the city limits. So in order to do that, that's the reason for this ordinance. We have to seek money, if that makes any sense. I call it found money. As I understand it,
My understanding, I'm having a hard time hearing you because of the lower, but, a sales tax from people within the city, is that what you're saying? What kind of tax is it?
you buy something on the internet, you pay tax,
Oh,
right?
okay.
We're by doing this ordinance, it qualifies us to get whatever that little percentage is, which is 1.5, and that figure was taken off Missouri resource tables that tell you what the percentage is, what tax rates are for every county and a lot of the cities in the county.
Who regulates this tax? I mean, we do,
Comes from
not
the-
I mean.
As far as I understand it, it comes from the state. It's like,
Okay, so the state.
that's my understanding. It's
Okay.
like state transportation or the other.
Okay.
Right?
It's the same as our regular city tax. It's the same as our regular city
Okay.
tax.
Yes.
We have,
Basically what happens if we don't do this, we don't get it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I understand what the tax was, that's all. I couldn't hear you.
Can we show that?
Well, I turned it off, to take it, don't push it up.
Now, Jesse, you know what ordinance some of this would be?
Have all those rules that were here.
Okay.
Really?
All right, I got the blanks, that's okay. All right, I don't need that pen. All right, thank you, I'm sorry. Let me see. It says it's ordinance 573, and evidently I have to read this 2 times for sure, in full.
If you, 2 good times and then you have to do that first approval.
Okay.
So you start making a motion before you read this.
Okay, make a motion to read this ordinance 573, internet tax.
I'll make a motion that we read ordinance 573.
I'll second.
You second.
Okay. Yes, Jim?
Yes.
Mike
Yes.
That's 4-0 for the first reading, sir.
Okay. An ordinance imposing a use tax for general revenue purposes at the rate of 1.5% pursuant to the authority granted by and subject to the provisions of section 144.600 through 144.761 RSMO, providing for the use tax to be repealed, reduced, or raised, and providing for submission of the proposal to the qualified voters of the city for their approval at the municipal election called and to be held on Tuesday, the 7th day of April 2020, fixing an effective date. Whereas the city has imposed total local sales taxes as defined in section 32.085 RSMO at the rate of 1.5%, and whereas the city is authorized under section 144.757 RSMO to impose a local use tax at a rate equal to the rate of the total sales taxes in effect in the city, and whereas the proposed city use tax cannot become effective until approved by the voters at a municipal, county, or state general, primary, or special elections. Now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of Dixon, Missouri as follows. Section 1. Pursuant to the authority granted by and subjected to the provisions of section 144.600 through 144.761 RSMO, a use tax for general revenue purposes is imposed for the privilege of storing, using, or consuming within the city any article of tangible personal property. This tax does not apply with respect to the storage, use, or consumption of any article of tangible personal property purchased, produced, or manufactured outside of the state until the transportation of the article has finally come to rest within this city, or until the article has become commingled with the general mass of property of this city. Section 2. The rate of the tax shall be 1.5% if any city sales tax is repealed or the rate thereof is reduced or raised by voter approval. The city use tax rate also shall be deemed to be replaced, reduced, or raised by the same action repealing, reducing, or raising the city sales tax. Section 3. This tax shall be submitted to the qualified voters of Dixon, Missouri for their approval as required by the provisions of section 144.757 RSMO at the election hereby called and to be held in the city on Tuesday, the 7th day of April 2020. The ballot of submission shall contain substantially the following language. Shall the City of Dixon impose a local use tax at the same rate as the total local sales tax rate, currently 1.5%, provided that if the local sales tax rate is reduced or raised by voter approval, the local use tax shall also be reduced or raised by the same action. A use tax return shall not be required to be filed by persons whose purchases from out-of-state vendors do not in total exceed $2,000 in any calendar year. If you are in favor of the question, please answer X in the box yes. If you are opposed to the question, place an X in the box opposite no. Section 4. Within 10 days after the approval of this ordinance by the qualified voters of Dixon, Missouri, the city clerk shall forward to the Director of Revenue of the State of Missouri by United States registered mail or certified mail a certified copy of this ordinance together with certifications of the election returns and accompanied by a map of the city clearly showing the boundaries thereof. Section 5. This ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after the date its passage and approval. Need a motion to read the second time?
I make a motion to read it the second time. I will second that. You might need this road. Yes.
Just
Michael.
Yes.
Trevor Long.
Yes.
Marshal.
Yes.
Passes 4-0 for second reading, sir.
okay. An ordinance imposing a use tax for general revenue purposes at the rate of 1.5% pursuant to the authority granted by and subject to the provisions of section 144.600 through 144.761 RSMO, providing for the use tax to be repealed, reduced or raised, and providing for submission of the proposal to the qualified voters of the city for their approval at the municipal election called and to be held on Tuesday, the 7th day of April, 2020, fixing an effective date. Whereas the city has imposed total local sales taxes as defined in section 32.085 RSMO at the rate of 1.5%, and whereas the city is authorized under section 144.757 RSMO to impose a local use tax at a rate equal to the rate of the total sales tax in effect in the city, and whereas the proposed city use tax may not become effective until approved by the voters at a municipal, county, or state general, primary, or special elections. Now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of Dixon, Missouri as follows. Section 1, pursuant to the authority granted by and subject to the provision of sections 144.600 through 144.761 RSMO, a use tax for general revenue purposes is imposed for the privilege of storing, using, or consuming within the city any article of tangible personal property. This tax is not applied with respect to the storage, use, or consumption of any article of tangible personal property purchased, produced, or manufactured outside of this state until the transportation of the article has finally come to rest within this city, or until the article has become commingled with the general mass of property of the city. Section 2. The rate of the tax shall be 1.5%. If any city sales tax is repealed, or the rate thereof is reduced or raised by vote of approval, the city use tax rate also shall be deemed to be repealed, reduced, or raised by the same action, repealing, reducing, or raising the city sales tax. Section 3. This tax shall be submitted to the qualified voters of Dixon, Missouri for their approval as required by the provisions of section 144.757 RSMO at the election hereby called and to be held in the city on the 7th day of April 2020. The ballot of submission shall contain substantially the following language. Shall the City of Dixon impose a local use tax at the same rate as the total local sales tax rate, currently 1.5%, provided that if the local sales tax rate is reduced or raised by voter approval, the local use tax shall also be reduced or raised by the same action. A use tax return shall not be required to be filled by persons whose purchases from out-of-state vendors do not in total exceed $2,000 in any calendar year. If you are in favor of the question, please answer yes, X in the box opposite yes. If you are opposed to the question, place an X in the box opposite no. Section 4. Within 10 days after the approval of this ordinance by the qualified voters of Dixon, Missouri, the city clerk shall forward to the Director of Revenue of the state of Missouri by United States registered mail or certified mail a certified copy of this ordinance together with certifications of the election returns and accompanied by a map of the city clearly showing the boundaries thereof. Section 5. This ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after the date its passage and approval.
All right. Did somebody make a motion?
I make a motion to read it for the third and final time.
No.
Somebody make a motion to approve, disapprove? This passage?
Just approve it. Excuse me, that's my opinion. We don't have to read it a third time, correct?
No.
Well, I thought we had a motion.
So we can entertain a motion to approve ordinance 573
That's it.
as read.
I'll make a motion to approve it as read.
I'll second.
Yes, Campbell.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Everyone.
Yes.
Angel.
Yes.
I said if you pass it, 4-0.
The next one up,
One of them has
excuse me,
2 minutes.
The next one's this Marshal pay. Now, we initially just made one out, and I believe it had 37,037 on the paper. But there's also another one in here that's not. Therefore, before we would read this ordinance and try to pass this, I think we need to decide what we want to pay the Marshal salary for the next 4 years, starting next year.
Well, I think that considering that minimum wage is going up over the next 4 years, and by the end of the term, minimum wage will be $12 an hour,
Right?
then I think the 38,000 is good.
I'll make a motion to make it 38,000.
Oh, wait a minute, no,
I'll second.
no,
No.
no. You spoke before I had a chance to say anything.
I made a motion, you seconded it.
No, just go ahead.
Um,
It should be up for debate, it shouldn't be just motioned on because one person spoke.
Okay. All right, let me ask you this. What figure do you have in your mind for this?
I was not worried about the figure's fine. What I was worried about is, for the Department of Labor, they had, when does that become effective?
Just comes first of January.
This is for,
So,
this
no,
is,
so,
this is.
wait, I understand. Okay, for January now, okay, is this 38,000 going to be effective
No.
then? Okay, so what becomes effective, is the 35,000 or the 36,000?
35,568 becomes effective January 1.
Okay, and then on
As
voting
of-
day, after voting day,
Whoever's elected marshal
the
will get
38,
the salary.
that's
that
what
we
I
decide.
that's what I wanted to.
And that's fine, that's fine.
Okay.
That's the salary that the marshal will get. Now, what you heard Trevor say, I think I really do think there's valid point to it, because the
Minimum wage.
minimum wage, as the way I understand it, it takes like an 85-cent jump every
It
year.
takes an 80 what?
85-cent jump.
Okay.
So in 3 years, you've gone from year to, what was it?
1065 to,
Even if it's 945 right now, it jumps to 12.
Okay.
Okay?
I mean, I'm in compliance with it all. I mean, I just wanted to make sure that what was going to, I knew we talked about it, because of the lettering stuff, and I knew that there was a certain
No.
figure on that, and that was effective January 1.
Right.
Okay?
And to
And
me,
that we pretty much came into a consensus of 38,000. So
Yeah.
and that would be effective April.
April,
Okay, that's the
April
clarification
1.
I
Now,
have.
and keep in mind,
Mhm.
Canada had a gentleman's agreement at 39, so you're not out of your parameter.
Right.
And the other thing too is, if you think about this, it's a 4-year, when it starts, it's that figure, at the end of 4 years, it's that figure too. Me personally, if this was a 2-year job, I wouldn't raise it that much. And I think, and Trevor did bring up a good point, to stay at the rate with
The federal.
minimum
Yes.
wage.
Yes, I understand.
And I would say at the end of 4 years, just so you know, we're going to do this.
At the end of
I
4 years,
understand.
as highly possible, it'll have to go up again.
And right now, I think with the 38,000, we are the highest out of the 4 locals.
No, Richland is 38,400.
Okay, so,
we're very close, we're on
Really
the
close.
walls with everything.
Yeah, really close.
But
Well, at least
hopefully in 4
we're, at
years,
least
we're
we're
going to
competitive.
Yes.
in a way.
be in a better financial position.
Well, and if you guys remember, I had talked about 37.7. The only reason I did that, because it figures out easy money for 2 weeks. That's the only reason I did that. So, but they've been paying 31,000 to the tune of 1192.38 every 2 weeks for the past 12 years, so, So,
Okay, you guys can make your motions now.
well, and there's, if I remember this correctly, Mike has a motion for what figure was it?
38, 32nd, I think at this point. So
38?
what's the time, Jesse?
Well, sir,
Doesn't it, like, we have to vote on it?
we need to vote for the first time reading on, Marshal Plan Ordinance, 574.
No, not,
First time for 38,000.
yeah, for 38, but we have to vote to make it 38,000.
Right.
Okay? There was a motion on the floor of Mike. Was there a second?
Yes.
Having a second, roll call?
when the ordinance passes.
Can I ask the council that when we have a situation like this, that we can kind of give somebody a chance to do some input or ask a question before we make a motion to accept? Just a little courtesy of this is what I'm asking for. Because I did have a pertinent question, and I just wanted to straighten out something that I knew, was going to transpire anyway.
Right, and what you asked was just a little bit of clarification.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I need.
Right. Well, basically, and I'll tell you why, brought that up before we get started. If we hadn't said anything, a month, 2 months down the road, why is this guy getting more money? You guys all know why, before it happens.
You can justify it, yes.
Right.
It's in the budget, that's all you got to say.
Exactly. So this would be ordinance 574.
Yes, sir. Someone to make a motion for first reading of 574 for 38,000.
I'll make the motion for the first reading of
I'll
ordinance
second.
574.
I'll second it, Jesse.
Andy Campbell.
Yes.
Marshal.
Yes.
Terry Long.
Yes.
Marshal.
Yes.
That's 4-0 for the first reading of 574.
Okay, it's ordinance 574, an ordinance fixing the salary of the city marshal. Whereas the City of Dixon, Missouri City is a city of the 4th class, and whereas the Board of Aldermen of the city is authorized pursuant to section 79.270 of the revised statutes of Missouri to fix the compensation of all officers and employees of the city by ordinance, and whereas it is the intent of the Board of Aldermen of the city to fix the salary of the city marshal. Now therefore be it ordained by the Board of Aldermen for the City of Dixon, Missouri as follows. Section 1. The city marshal shall receive as his compensation to the city the sum of $38,000 per year. Section 2. That this pay increase shall become effective on the swearing in of the marshal duly elected in the municipal election in April 2020. Section 2. Any other ordinance and any part of any other ordinance in conflict with the provisions of this ordinance are hereby repealed. Section 3. This ordinance shall be in full force and effective immediately upon its approval and passage by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Dixon, Missouri. So that should be the first reading.
Okay. Somebody make a motion for a second reading.
I'll make a motion for a second reading of ordinance 574.
I'll second.
Nancy.
Yep.
Andy Campbell.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Trevor Long.
Yes.
Diane Schultz.
Yes.
That's 4-0 for second reading, ordinance paid, 38,000.
Okay. Ordinance 474, an ordinance fixing the salary of the city marshal. Whereas the City of Dixon, Missouri City is a city of the 4th class, and whereas the Board of Aldermen of the city is authorized pursuant to section 79.270 of the revised statutes of Missouri to fix the compensation of all officers and employees of the city by ordinance, and whereas it is the intent of the Board of Aldermen of the city to fix the salary of the city marshal. Now therefore be it ordained by the Board of Aldermen for the City of Dixon, Missouri as follows. Section 1. The city marshal shall receive as his compensation to the city the sum of $38,000 per year. Section 2. That this pay increase shall become effective upon the swearing in of the marshal duly elected in the municipal election in April 2020. Section 2. Any other ordinance and any part of any other ordinance in conflict with the provisions of this ordinance are hereby repealed. Section 3. This ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its approval and passage by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Dixon, Missouri. Before we go any further, do yours all say section 1, section 2, section 2, and section 3? You have section 2 listed twice?
We don't have copies.
I haven't read it on the.
Okay.
It says, that's what it says, Alan.
Well, that's just to change. section 3 and section 4. I read it the first time I did those things. Well, see where it says section 2, section 2, and section 3. That's just a dramatic.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Just a little error.
Need somebody to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve ordinance 574.
I'll second.
Ken Campbell.
Yes.
Mike Noel.
Yes.
Trevor Warren.
Yes.
Diane Schultz.
Yes.
Marshall Davis, passes 4-0. $38,000 on, swearing in, April 2020.
The next item would be ordinance 575. This is, 575, excuse me.
Yes.
Oh, okay, this is the half-cent sales tax. And just, I think you guys know that they had made an ordinance, in order to put this on the ballot last year. And you can put it on, is that correct if I'm wrong, Jeff? You can put it on 2 years in a row?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't have to read it or anything?
No, the safest thing was to assign a new number, and we can read it twice.
Can we read it just one time for the video, so when people watch the video, they know what's going on?
Jesse, what's the?
That's not proper procedure,
Huh?
not proper procedure.
Right, it has to be read twice, as far as I know. So we need a motion to read this first reading, Jesse?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're gonna read it anyway.
What?
You're gonna read it anyway.
Doesn't matter, you have to make a motion just like.
Okay, I make a motion that we read ordinance 575 for the first time.
All right.
I'll second.
Trevor?
Campbell.
Yes.
Mike Noel.
Yes.
Trevor Warren.
Yes.
Diane Schultz.
Yes.
That's 4-0 for, ordinance 575 on the asset tax and revenue for first time.
Ordinance 575, an ordinance imposing a city sales tax to be used solely for the City of Dixon, Missouri law enforcement purposes on all sellers for the privilege of engaging in the business of selling tangible personal property or rendering taxable services at retail at the rate of 0.5% on receipts from the sale at retail of all tangible personal property or taxable services at retail within the City of Dixon, Missouri, if such property and services are subject to taxation by the state of Missouri under the provisions of section 144.010 to 144.525 RSMO, pursuant to the authority granted by and subject to the provisions of section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO, and providing for submission to the qualified voters of the City of Dixon, Missouri, at the next general election day scheduled for November. Where's my fault? My fault.
Should be April 7.
What's that? This has the general election day scheduled for November 6, 2018.
That should be April 7th.
All right, both my copies have, and that's all right, April 7, 2020. Okay, that's great stuff. A proposition authorizing the imposition of said municipal sales tax of 0.5% to be used solely for the City of Dixon, Missouri law enforcement purposes. Whereas under the provisions of section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO, the City of Dixon, Missouri is authorized to impose by ordinance a tax upon all sellers for the privilege of engaging in the business of selling tangible personal property or rendering taxable services at the rate of 0.5% on receipts from the sale at retail of all tangible personal property or taxable services at retail within the City of Dixon, Missouri, if such property and services are subject to taxation by the state of Missouri under the provisions of section 144.010 to 144.525 RSMO. Whereas Section 94.510 RSMO further provides that no ordinance enacted pursuant to the authority granted by the provisions of Section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO shall be effective unless the legislative body of the City of Dixon submits to the voters of the city at a public election a proposal to authorize the legislative body of the city to impose a tax under the provisions of Section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO. Whereas the Board of Aldermen of the City of Dixon has determined it is in the best interest of the city to submit to the qualified voters of the city a proposition that, if approved, will authorize imposition of 1/2 of 1% sales tax on all retail sales made. I didn't know this was 2 pages. Made in the city to be used solely for the City of Dixon, Missouri law enforcement purposes to the extent authorized by law. Whereas the Board of Aldermen of the City of Dixon, Missouri has further determined that it would be advisable for the direct submission of the proposition hereinafter set forth at the next general election scheduled for April 7, 2020. Now therefore be it ordained by the Board of Aldermen for the City of Dixon, Missouri as follows. Section 1, pursuant to the authority granted by and subject to the provisions of Section 94.500 and 94.550 RSMO, a tax hereby is imposed upon all sellers for the privilege of engaging in the business of selling tangible personal property or rendering of taxable services at retail to the extent and in the manner provided in Section 144.101, to 144.510 RSMO, and the rules and regulations of the Director of Revenue issued and promulgated, I believe. Excuse me? No, promulgated, I think. The rate of the tax shall be 1/2 of 1% on the receipts from the sales at retail of all tangible personal property or taxable service at retail within the City of Dixon, Missouri. If such property and services are subject to taxation by the state of Missouri under the provisions of Section 144.010 to 144.525 RSMO, the tax shall become effective as provided in Section 94.510 RSMO and shall be collected pursuant to the provisions of Sections 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO. Section 2, the 1/2 of 1% tax imposed by this ordinance shall be in addition to and shall not replace or otherwise affect any already existing sales tax previously imposed and collected within the City of Dixon, Missouri. Section 3, as required by Section 94.510 RSMO, this order shall be submitted to the qualified voters of the City of Dixon, Missouri for their approval at the next general election day scheduled for April 7, 2020 by way of the following proposition, to wit. City sales tax proposition for city law enforcement. Shall the City of Dixon, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 1/2 of 1% to be used solely for City of Dixon law enforcement purposes? If you're in favor of the question, fill in the box opposite yes. If you are opposed to the question, fill in the box opposite no. Section 4. The qualified voters of the city residing in the election precincts located within the city shall vote at such voting places at such times as are established in connection with the general election day scheduled for April 7, 2020. Section 5. The county clerk of Pulaski County, hereinafter county clerk, shall conduct the election herein provided for, and they shall serve as the election authority for said election under the provisions of Chapter 115 of the revised statutes of Missouri. Section 6. The county clerk, as election authority for the election herein provided for, shall give notice of said election required of him by law, shall appoint the election judges for the polling places at which said election is to be held, and shall supply all voting equipment, ballot boxes, tally sheets, precinct registers, and other supplies necessary for the conduct of said election. The ballots to be used at said election shall contain the following information in substantially the following form, subject to such revisions and modifications as to form but not content as may be required for use of voting system selected by the county clerk. municipal election ballot, city sales tax proposition for city law enforcement, City of Dixon, Pulaski County, Missouri, Tuesday the 7th day of April 2020. The instructions to voters: if you are in favor of the proposition, fill in the box opposite yes. If you are opposed to the proposition, fill in the box opposite no. City sales tax proposition for city law enforcement. Shall the City of Dixon, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 1/2 of 1% to be used solely for City of Dixon law enforcement purposes? Absentee ballots shall contain the same information and be in substantially the form above set forth. Defined in section 115.275 RSMO.
You skipped a page.
Excuse me? What did you say?
You skipped a page.
I guess.
See it, section 3.
At the top of the page, it says section 8.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got section 9 here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
This is section 8.
I love this.
The county clerk is authorized and directed to give notice of the submission of the said proposition at the aforesaid election by publication in the Dixon Pilot, a newspaper printed and published in Dixon, Missouri, and in general circulation therein. The said notice shall be in said newspaper twice, the first publication occurring in the second week prior to the election, and the second publication occurring within 1 week prior to the election. The said notice to be so published shall be in substantially the following form, to wit: notice of sales tax proposition for city law enforcement, general election, City of Dixon, Pulaski County, Missouri. Notice is hereby given that at the next general regular election to be held in the City of Dixon, Missouri on Tuesday the 7th day of 2020, there will be submitted to the qualified electors of said city the following proposition, to wit: city sales tax proposition for city law enforcement. Shall the City of Dixon, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 1/2 of 1% to be used solely for City of Dixon law enforcement purposes? Qualified electors of the City of Dixon within said city shall vote at the following polling place established for said precinct. Polling place: Dixon Senior Citizen Center, 301 Y Road, Dixon, Missouri. The polls of said election shall be opened at the hour of 6 o'clock in the morning, Central Daylight Time, and will remain open until the hour of 7 o'clock in the evening, Central Daylight Time, on the aforesaid date, except for absentee ballots cast by purposes in federal service. No person shall be allowed to vote whose name does not appear in the precinct register without the express sanction of the election authority. Any person who is qualified to vote, or who shall become qualified to vote on or before the day of election, shall be entitled to register in the jurisdiction in which he or she resides. In order to vote in any election for which registration is required, a person must be registered. A person must be registered to vote in the jurisdiction of his or her residence no later than 5 p.m. or the normal closing time of any public building where the registration being held, if such time is later than 5 p.m. on the fourth Wednesday prior to the said election, unless the voter is an interstate former resident, an intrastate new resident, or a new resident as defined in section 115.275 RSMO. In no case shall registration for an election extend beyond 10 p.m. on the fourth Wednesday prior to the elections. This comes from the city clerk, City of Dixon, Missouri. Section 9. In order to comply with the provisions of section 115.125 RSMO, the city clerk is directed hereby to transmit to the county clerk of Pulaski County notice of the passing of this ordinance by the board. Section 10. The form of that is mentioned in paragraph 2 of the notice provided for in section 7 of this ordinance shall be in substantially the following form, to wit: notice of election, City of Dixon, Pulaski County, Missouri. Notice is hereby given to the qualified electors of the City of Dixon, Pulaski County, Missouri, that the Board of Aldermen of said city has called an election to be held in said city on general election day, Tuesday, the 7th day of April 2020. The ballots to be used at said election shall contain the following information in substantially the following form, subject to revisions and modifications as to form, but not content, as may be required for use of the voting system selected by the county clerk. Municipal election ballots, city sales tax proposition for city law enforcement, City of Dixon, Missouri, Tuesday, the 7th day of April 2020. Instructions to the voters: if you're in favor of the proposition, fill in the box opposite yes. If you're opposed to the proposition, fill in the box opposite no. City sales tax proposition or city tax enforcement. Shall the City of Dixon, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 1/2 of 1% to be used solely for City of Dixon law enforcement purposes? Absentee ballots shall contain the same information and be in substantially the form above set forth. Qualified electors of the City of Dixon residing the election precinct located within the said city shall vote at the following polling place established for said precincts. Polling place, Dixon Senior Center, 301 Old Y Road, Dixon, Missouri. Polls of said election will be opened at the hour of 6 o'clock in the morning, Central Daylight Time, and remain open until the hour of 7 o'clock in the evening, Central Daylight Time, on the aforesaid date. Except for absentee ballots cast by persons in federal service, no person shall be allowed to vote whose name does not appear in the precinct register without the express sanction of the election authority. Any person who is qualified to vote or who shall become qualified to vote on or before the day of election shall be entitled to register in the jurisdiction within which he or she resides. In order to vote in any election for which registration is required, a person must be registered to vote in the jurisdiction of his or her residence not later than 5 p.m. or the normal closing time of any public building where the registration is being held if such time is later than 5 p.m. on the fourth Wednesday prior to the said election, unless the voters an interstate former resident, an interstate new resident, or a new resident as defined in section 115.275 RSM. In no case shall registration for any election extend beyond 10 p.m. on the fourth Wednesday prior to the election. Any person registering after such date shall be eligible to vote in subsequent elections. In witness thereof, set his hand, fixed the seal, and reviewed by the county clerk and election authority. Section 11. Within 10 days after the approval of this ordinance by the qualified voters of Dixon, Missouri, the city clerk shall forward to the Director of Revenue of the state of Missouri by United States registered or certified mail a certified copy of this ordinance together with certifications of the election returns and accompanied by a map of the city clearly showing the boundaries thereof. In Section 12, that this ordinance shall be enforced and take effect from and after its passage and approval.
Wow.
We didn't quite get that.
Can we go for 3 times?
I'm going to pass it off in those 2 times. And I don't know why. I apologize.
No.
What happened here with
Can I ask you a question before you read the second time? This tax money is allocated for purposes of uniforms. Now, what is the specific?
Anything law enforcement.
It would be no different, to me it's very simple, that a half-cent sales tax for what?
Yes.
This
Does
is,
that include like guns, bullets,
Can be anything.
computers?
Law enforcement related.
our city police is a big chunk of your budget. It's been slashed by $100,000 over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
This is trying to get, I think, largely police wages competitive again.
Can this be used for salaries?
Yes.
I mean, it was 317, 318 last year, this year 263.5.
And the year before that, it was
It was
And the
on-
anticipation of when I have
It was
something
quite
to bring in.
378.
378.
You know, I got a funny feeling I did too. Yeah. But you know what, after you start reading.
What was
this-
estimated?
It's the same as the library tax.
They said roughly 80. 368.
They're the
this is supposed to be.
We lost it by what, 2 votes? 2 votes.
One.
Two votes.
There's one to be on.
Do we really have to read this one?
I should have voted this.
Does every city?
Got megawatt?
Jeff,
Unless you post it.
I think Mr. Thomas was just waiting for this, because, you know,
I just spelled my name with
It's
C
posted on the
and
side.
L.
I don't know. I
I thought we
thought
could double check.
if it's posted on the side, I don't know why you're reading it.
I will read it the second time if we,
I don't think
so
we
is
have,
I.
I don't think we have to.
Are we,
It's all
are
By statute, it has to be read twice.
we
If
out
it's not, by state statute, if it's not posted
It's posted on the
publicly,
side of the building.
if this is not posted for the public to read prior to the meeting, it has to be read twice.
That statute was also declared unconstitutional, but that's the way that we've always passed them here, so
read it twice.
I'd read it twice.
Read it twice. Now, to what Robert said, I think had we ever do this again,
If this had been
if we ever do
available
this
for,
again, this whole thing would be, let's say at the post office, would be at the library, up front here, I don't know how to post it out front, but anywhere where somebody can pick this entire
I mean,
thing.
we're reading it for, I'm
But
not
your
sure.
lawyer also said that ordinance is unconstitutional.
No, the ordinance, the statute.
The statute governing
Posted was declared
that it has to be posted.
unconstitutional, but we had no other mechanism that they replaced it with to pass ordinances. So
But Jeff, this
By
being an
condition, it's
existing
what I-
ordinance, why would we have to read it
It's
second
not
time?
existing.
I'll read it
It's
twice.
the ordinance that we.
Now, let me say this.
This is a vision of it.
Let me say this, I've got a copy of the statement together, and hopefully I won't read the page twice, which I think I would.
I don't, we're gonna vote for it 3 times.
Okay, that's fine with me.
You guys could have read it again, how you talked about reading it.
Okay, I make a motion to reread it for the second
Make
time.
I'll second.
I got a motion for reading it second, made, motion and second.
Who made the motion? Diane and Mike seconded.
Mike made a motion, Diane seconded.
Diane.
Excuse me.
Jeff, was
Diane first.
Can we just post it in the newspaper?
That's it, okay. F. Campbell,
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
Trevor Warren,
Yes.
Diane Shore.
Yes.
That's 4-0 for second reading tax ordinance, 575 for April ballot 2020.
Do you get any deep voices or anything now?
You what?
Do you like a Jack Nicholson impression when you read?
Don't worry about that, we'll, you know.
I think it'd be good to like use it, make it interesting, different characters.
No, I'm not gonna, I'm just trying, it's a long one, I know nobody wants to, but the thing, and before I start reading this, because this stuff is on the ballot, it is critical that you follow the right procedure. So, we'll read it a second time, and I believe we'll be going. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. An ordinance imposing a city sales tax to be used solely for the City of Dixon, Missouri, law enforcement purposes on all sellers for the privilege of engaging in the business of selling tangible personal property or rendering taxable services at retail at the rate of 1/2 of 1% on the receipts from the sale at retail of all tangible personal property or taxable services at retail within the City of Dixon, Missouri, if such property and services are subject to taxation by the state of Missouri under the provisions of section 144.010 to 144.525 RSMO pursuant to the authority granted by and subject to the provisions of sections 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO and providing for submission to the qualified voters of the City of Dixon, Missouri at the next general election day scheduled for April 7, 2020. Proposition authorizing the imposition of said municipal sales tax of 1/2 of 1% to be used solely for the City of Dixon, Missouri law enforcement purposes. Whereas under the provisions of section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO, the City of Dixon, Missouri is authorized to impose by ordinance a tax upon all sellers for the privilege of engaging in the business of selling tangible personal property or rendering taxable services at the rate of 1/2 of 1% on the receipts from the sale at retail of all tangible personal property or taxable services at retail within the City of Dixon, Missouri. If such property and services are subject to taxation by the state of Missouri with the provisions of sections 141.010 to 144.525 RSMO. Whereas sections 94.510 RSMO further provides that no ordinance enacted pursuant to the authority granted by the provisions of sections 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO shall be effective unless the legislative body of the City of Dixon, Missouri submits to the voters of the city at a public election a proposal to authorize the legislative body of the city to impose a tax under the provisions of section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO. Whereas the Board of Aldermen of the City of Dixon, Missouri has determined it is in the best interest of the city to submit to the qualified voters of the city a proposition that, if approved, will authorize imposition of 1% sales tax on all retail sales made in the city to be used solely for the City of Dixon, Missouri, law enforcement purposes to the extent authorized by law. Whereas the Board of Aldermen of the City of Dixon, Missouri has further determined that it would be advisable for the direct submission of the proposition hereinafter set forth at the next general election day scheduled for April 7, 2020. Now therefore be ordained by the Board of Aldermen for the City of Dixon, Missouri as follows. Section 1. Pursuant to the authority granted by and subject to the provisions of section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO, a tax hereby is imposed on all sellers for the purpose of engaging in the business of selling tangible personal property or rendering of taxable services at retail to the extent and in the manner provided in section 144.010 to 144.510 RSMO, and the rules and regulations of the Director of Revenue issued and promulgated pursuant thereto. The rate of the property or taxable service, the rate of the tax shall be 1/2 of 1% on the receipts from the sale at retail of all tangible personal property or taxable service at retail within the City of Dixon, Missouri, if such property and services are subject to taxation by the State of Missouri under the provisions of section 144.010 to 144.525 RSMO. The tax shall become effective as provided in section 94.510 RSMO and shall be collected pursuant to the provisions of section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO. Section 2. The 1/2 of 1% tax imposed by this ordinance shall be in addition to and shall not replace or otherwise affect any already existing sales tax previously imposed and collected within the City of Dixon, Missouri. Section 3. As required by section 94.510 RSMO, this ordinance shall be submitted to the qualified voters of the City of Dixon, Missouri for their approval at the next general election day scheduled for April 7, 2020 by way of the following proposition, to wit. City sales tax proposition for city law enforcement. Shall the City of Dixon, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 1/2 of 1% to be used solely for City of Dixon, Missouri law enforcement purposes. If you're in favor of the question, fill in the box opposite yes. If you're opposed to the question, fill in the box opposite no. Section 4. Qualified voters of the city residing in the election precincts located within the city shall vote at such voting places at such times as are established in connection with the general election day scheduled for April 7th, 2020. Section 5. The County Clerk of Pulaski County, hereinafter County Clerk, shall conduct the election hearing provided for, and they shall serve as the election authority for said election under the provisions of Chapter 115 of the Revised Statutes of Missouri. Section 6. The County Clerk is election authority for the election hearing provided for, shall give notice of said election required of him by law, shall appoint the election judges for the polling places at which said election is to be held, and shall supply all voting equipment, ballot boxes, tally sheets, precinct registers, and other supplies necessary for the conduct of said election. Section 7. The ballots to be used at said election shall contain the following information in substantially the following form, subject to such revisions and modifications as to form, but not content, as may be required for use of the voting system selected by the county clerk. Municipal election ballots, city sales tax proposition for city law enforcement, City of Dixon, Pulaski County, Missouri, Tuesday the 7th day of April 2020. Instructions to voters. If you're in favor of the proposition, fill in the box opposite yes. If If you're opposed to the proposition, fill in the box opposite no. Shall the City of Dixon, city sales tax proposition for city law enforcement. Shall the City of Dixon, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 0.5% to be used solely for City of Dixon law enforcement purposes? Absentee ballots shall contain the same information and be in substantially the form above set forth. Section 8. The county clerk is authorized and directed to give notice of the submission of the said proposition at the aforesaid election by publication of the Dixon Pilot, a newspaper printed and published in Dixon, Missouri, and of general circulation therein. The said notice shall be in the said newspaper twice, the first publication occurring in the second week prior to the election, and the second publication occurring within 1 week prior to the election. The said notice to be so published shall be in substantially the following form, to wit: notice of sales tax proposition for city law enforcement, general elections, City of Dixon, Pulaski County, Missouri. Notice is hereby given that at the next general regular election to be held in the City of Dixon, Missouri on Tuesday, the 7th day of April 2020, there will be submitted to the qualified electors of said city the following proposition, to wit: city sales tax proposition for city law enforcement. Shall the City of Dixon, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 0.5% to be used solely for City of Dixon law enforcement purposes? Qualified electors of the City of Dixon within said city shall vote at the following polling place established for said precinct. The polling place, Dixon Senior Citizens Center, 301 Wide Road, Dixon, Missouri. The polls of said election shall be opened at the hour of 6 o'clock in the morning, Central Daylight Time, and will remain open until the hour of 7 o'clock in the evening, Central Daylight Time, on the aforesaid date. Except for absentee ballots cast by persons in federal service, no person shall be allowed to vote whose name does not appear in the precinct register without the express sanction of the election authority. Any person who is qualified to vote, or who shall become qualified to vote on or before the day of election, shall be entitled to register in the jurisdiction within which he or she resides. In order to vote in any election for which registration is required, a person must be registered. A person must be registered to vote in the jurisdiction of his or her residence no later than 5 p.m. or the normal closing time of any public building where the registration being held, if such time is later than 5 p.m. on the fourth Wednesday prior to the said election, unless the voter is an interstate former resident, an interstate new resident, or a new resident, as defined in section 115.275 RSM. In no case shall registration for an election extend beyond 10 p.m. on the fourth Wednesday prior to the elections. City Clerk, City of Dixon, Missouri. Section 9. In order to comply with the provisions of section 115.125 RSMO, the City Clerk is directed hereby to transmit to the County Clerk of Pulaski County notice of the passing of this ordinance by the board. Section 10. The form of notice mentioned in paragraph 2 of the notice provided for in section 7 of this ordinance shall be in substantially the following form, to wit: notice of election, City of Dixon, Missouri, City of Dixon, Pulaski County, Missouri. Notice is hereby given to the qualified electors of the City of Dixon, Pulaski County, Missouri, that the Board of Aldermen of said city has called an election to be held in said city on the general election day, Tuesday, the 7th day of April 2020. The ballots to be used at said election shall contain the following information in substantially the following form, subject to such revisions and modifications as to form, but not content, as may be required for use of the voting system selected by the county clerk. Municipal election ballot, city sales tax, proposition for city law enforcement, City of Dixon, Missouri, Tuesday the 7th day of April 2020. Instruction to the voters: if you're in favor of the proposition, fill in the box opposite yes. If you're opposed to the proposition, fill in the box opposite no. City sales tax proposition for city law enforcement. Shall the City of Dixon, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 0.5% to be used solely for City of Dixon law enforcement purposes? Absentee. I just read that, and I know. You're right. I might be there.
It appears multiple times.
Yeah, I've already read that. Section 9, section 10. Section 11. Within 10 days after the approval of this ordinance by the qualified voters of Dixon, Missouri, the city clerk shall forward to the Director of Revenue of the state of Missouri by United States registered or certified mail a certified copy of this ordinance, together with certifications of the election returns and accompanied by a map of the city clearly showing the boundaries thereof. That this ordinance shall be enforced and take effect from and after its passage and approval. So I believe that is the second reading.
All right. Did somebody make a motion to pass or now this ordinance 575?
Do what?
Did somebody make a motion to pass the ordinance?
Should we nominate a attorney?
No.
I make a motion on 575 that we approve the reading of make a motion to pass, I'm sorry, on 575.
I'll second it.
Yes, Campbell.
Yes.
Mayne.
Yes.
Marshal.
Yes.
Marshal.
Yes.
Passes 4-0. Ordinance 575 has an effect on the general election ballot for April 7, 2020. Next year.
I think we've passed more ordinances in one meeting.
This is a prime example of why you try to space your ordinances periodically, but
Kind of bring it in right.
at the same time, these need to be on the ballot, and we want to make sure that we got them. So with this being done, now we know that we can get this on the ballot, as it's stated. City clerk submits, does his ballot, and submits this down there. Okay. Now, chapter 700, we've got down there listed, that is another ordinance. It's been drawn up, but there are some things that Mr. Thomas wanted to check out further. Hopefully, we'll try to get this the first week of December. And in case you were wondering, it deals with the fact that every user will be charged an availability rate, which is our bare minimum fee. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If there's any more information about that, we can always send out an email. So I believe at this time, just table make a motion to table.
I'll make a motion that we table chapter 700 amendments till further notice.
Who said it? Yes, Campbell.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Everyone.
Yes.
Marshal.
Yes.
Passes 4-0 for chapter 700. The next meeting will be in December.
The last thing on here, there are three little areas that when we did the fiscal budget, if you'll remember, we said it's not something that's always set in stone. Things do change, things arise. You can amend the budget, and we need to do that. The way I understand it, the debt figures that we assign to the sewer and the street, those figures need to be zeroed out and added into the water department. Is that correct?
Which one are you talking about? Talking about
The repairs from water, sewer and street going to water.
I think it's good to have another company, we need to look at the trash and our liquor fees.
That was on your, wasn't that on your tower bill? Remember, it was 26.1?
Yes.
We split it between sewer, street, and water.
Right.
But the bill is for the tower, which is out of water. Out of water.
Right.
It's just a simple thing.
So why do we have to change it?
Because the money comes out of the water bill.
Okay, so I thought we put it on water.
We put a third of it, we split it.
So we put the total
We
amount
just
on
put the
water.
total, that's,
Consolidated.
just line item,
And
lateral
how
numbers.
much is the amount? 26 what?
Well, okay, on the budget is 8,700 for 3 departments, which totals, what is it, 26.1. Yeah, 26.1. So that's all we have, that's one of them, simple thing.
So tower to water.
And the other thing that we did, which I wasn't aware, we divided legal expenses between administration, court, police, water, and sewer. And my understanding is that the legal expenses should just have been split between administration and court. So the figure that we had, and if I remember this correctly, I think it was $4,000. We had a total of $20,000. We split it between 5 departments, which was $4,000. My only question is, Jessica, is admin and court 50-50?
No,
Okay.
I would say, it's probably 70-30, court 30 and admin 70.
All right, and I don't have anything to figure what 7% is. Yeah, 17.
2,000 is 7%.
Yeah, if you got a total of 27, what's 7%?
27?
No, it's 70%. 70% of 20,000.
14,000.
How much?
14,000.
Okay.
Yeah, 14.
Well, my ears are still ringing from you, okay? And then 30% obviously would be the 6,000. So it's just a matter of
So why are we doing this?
because the legal expenses should be split only between administration and court. That's my understanding. Not police, water and sewer. Unless, that's how I read it. Am I incorrect?
Most of it's administrative. It kind of depends what questions you guys ask me on a monthly basis.
Okay.
In my mind, so treating it all as an administrative expense makes sense.
Like I said, that's how I read it. What's your thoughts?
Where did you read it from?
Well, what point do you take legal fees out of water? What's the word you do to write an ordinance on the water?
No, I'm asking, where did you read the information from?
I just I like the same way. I was reading through there. I don't remember. I've read so much I can't.
Any ordinances or something?
No, no ordinances in there. There was no
Comparing
ordinance.
the budget to my bills.
What's that?
I think he's probably comparing the budget to my bills.
Yeah.
But it said we have to delegate it just between admin and
I don't think we have to, it's just probably just code study. That's why, like Jess said, we were majority pulling that out of administrative, so we're never really pulling that out
right.
of water.
Right.
So I guess this.
The dollar amount, the total dollar amount doesn't change. It just depends on
Why are we
the court.
splitting it with the court then?
What?
Why are we splitting it with the court?
Would that be legal?
Oh, that's right, we do the prosecutor, yeah. Okay, so we'll do 70-30 for admin and court,
Okay.
for legal, consolidate,
Yeah.
do 14,000 for admin and 6,000 for court, is that how we're working it?
Right.
Okay.
Just small, there's a small.
Can I make a motion for that?
And then, Jesse, do you think we have to make a motion for each one of these or collectively? What? Okay.
We can do it collectively.
Yeah, we got one more item. And I hadn't really thought about it that much, but I know that we would talked about this, but we never did put in an amount for the income off the trash. And
Well, wasn't that being somehow repaired or revised in some fashion?
what I've done is I took 7743 times 12, and it's 92,916, and I would put it under dumping fees.
You said 773, that's the number of,
I used that 7743 that they had almost all the time.
Have we ever used dumping fees before?
Well, I didn't know what other classification to put it in. I didn't,
What did they do in the past, Jesse?
Well, there's
What's the trash income?
before you keep buying it, the city took care of it before,
Yes.
and, we had
But
all
income
kinds of
to the
numbers in the trash. And then, during the Brown administration, they did have, numbers in the trash, and we could,
I think what he's asking, was there another line item besides dumping fees?
to put that in.
Yes.
That's what I'm asking them, where would we get the income from the trash?
I will put it under, 01306130, which is dump fees.
Okay. So we have used that in the past.
so we put $7,743 times 12, you said?
That's what I used. And 3 months down the road, we may, trying to keep a handle on the WCA figures, and it's possible it might be amended. I hope not, but it's possible.
What did you come up with for the figure for the year,
What are you talking about?
for the trash?
Well, whatever 7,743 is, times 12.
I came up with 92,916.
There you go. So, I guess it'd be a motion to make. There would be 3 parts to this. First part would be to amend the old debt figures from sewer and street to the water department only. Second one would be to create a line item for trash under dumpster. Line item 6130 dumping fees in the amount of $92,916. And the third one would be to split legal expenses between administration at 70% and court at 30%.
And the tower was how much again? You said 26,100? You want to make a motion for that? Is that what you want?
What was the total on the trash?
92,916.
So I'm
The-
going to make a motion. I can make a motion.
Well, what was the first part of the streets? What do you have with the streets?
Do I know?
What do you do with the streets?
Just taking the old debt that's assigned to sewer and street and put it all in one.
What?
That's the tower. The tower bill. For some reason, the tower debt got divvied up between 3 different accounts.
Is there no other old debt for the streets in the city?
What's that?
Is there no other old debt then? For the streets and sewer?
Not that I'm aware of.
So you're saying the water tower bill, explain this to me now, so break this down.
What's
So
that?
you're saying the water tower bill got divvied up when we were doing the budget under streets and what else?
Street, sewer, and water. Why, I don't
I
know.
don't understand why streets.
I don't know. All I know is if I've got a line item for 8,700 on the water, for the whole debt, after 8,700, I'm in the negative to pay that debt.
So what you're really wanting is more money to pay the water tower.
Basically take and just move that,
So consolidated into
move
one.
the 8,700 out of the street, the 8,700 out of the sewer, move it over to the water, move it to the water line item for all that.
So what happens when we have, and you're saying we have no debt for anything else?
On the sewer and street, not that I'm aware of.
So we, so ideally, right here, what you're wanting us is to zero out the sewer and zero out the street. But what's gonna happen now when we have bills come due? Because I know we have bills for supplies for sewer.
Right, those are new bills and recurring bills. So that's not the old debt from April 1. Because if you remember on the trash side, we put 30,000 or 30,500, which was the amount that was the old debt come October 10th or October 1.
So the-
That never got split anywhere. That's all in trash.
So anything removed is good. Anything removed is old debt.
I say we as a whole, school board, I guess, is they're wanting, I'm sure we're wanting to pay off the water tower bill, right?
Right.
Can't we amend it just so that we can just add?
Do we have that money right now, Jesse? If we move all this over?
Do we have the money?
Yeah.
Physical money? No. Have the physical money, no, we have the numbers.
But this is based on yearly anyway.
Right, these were the numbers that we came up with to operate on the upcoming physical budget.
When do you want to pay that off, Ralph?
There's $14,000 left.
But when do you want to pay it off? That's my question.
I wanted to pay it off by the end of February, but that's not going to happen now. But we have to pay $3,000
Have you
per
made
month.
contact with them after our initial contact?
Yeah, I made contact with them.
But after the meeting?
Yeah.
So after we pay this, we'll be golden.
Well, you'll be paid up.
So
You're just not going to have a contract.
we don't have a contract. That's
No. And we have to pay
We don't have a
$3,000.
contract with the town?
Not anymore.
I thought,
Nope. You're all done.
so now we're gonna start over at a higher rate.
Probably.
Man. How did that happen? By not paying the bill?
Pretty much.
I don't know if I said something with that.
We can leave it the same.
And I'll be honest with you, so this is my hold up on this, gentlemen, is I'm all right with paying it if we somehow figure out how to renew. For one, I want us to be able to actually have the money. If we don't have the money, it's just, like we say, it's numbers. If I don't have liquid
And
assets.
that's what all this is.
I understand,
Bookkeeping numbers.
but-
That's just, they're just numbers. I don't mean that they're just numbers, you know.
But my hold up here is that we move this money over, which if we really don't have some old sewer debt or some, I'd be very surprised. That's just me. I could be wrong. But let's even go on this. I don't want to pay that all off or even give anybody the power to pay that all off until we figure out what our next game plan is. What's our next step? If we pay you guys off, what do we need to do after this to renew our contract? That's the question I want to answer.
So you gotta submit it again and hope they give it to you. And you'll be classified as risk, and you'll have to go in front of the vice president.
And I'm not by no means saying I don't want to pay this because I think we should pay all of our old debt, but at the same token, I think we need to prioritize it, and I don't want to make this priority right now. I don't have a one cozy, so that's just,
And we've got a,
I'm going to be a hard no on that one.
that's all right. We've got a tower report DNR wants that comes from this company, and I haven't been able to get it yet. And I'm not sure why. I'm gonna try and call.
That should have been done back in 2018.
A lot of things should have been done back in 18. No, I'm not arguing against you, you know.
No, and I get it now, but at the same token, I don't have a long cozy about that one. That's just, I'm gonna be a hard one on that, so.
Because what
If we
we
don't have the money right now, why don't we just move it when we have the money?
I feel better if we move them.
we can leave them all where they're at. Leave those figures right where they were if you want to. But they're gonna have to have $3,000 every month until it's paid. Because it's going through collections. It ain't going to these guys, it's in collections.
Oh, okay, that's why we didn't have a contract.
Oh, yeah. So,
How many months till we're?
you got 14,000 left.
It's
14,000.
only 8,700.
Huh?
No, how many months until you're out of 8,700? It gives us 2 months, correct?
Less than 3.
Yeah, just 3 months will be 9,000.
So then we can,
So in 2 months.
Well, you do that, now that's another good idea, Trevor. You already got 87 on there, you could make 2 payments, and that would leave you 6, that would leave you $8,000. You could take some out
We
of
could reevaluate.
sewer and street, take half and half to cover that last part debt. I'm not opposed to that.
What are you pulling out of now? What's the account number?
What's that?
What are we paying out of right now, Jesse?
The tower company? 3,000.
Should be 210, 8,000.
Oh, God, that I don't know.
and we owe 14 or we owe 26?
We owe 14 right now.
Okay,
As
that's
of
in
today.
collections, okay,
Yes,
okay.
Why is
So-
that coming out of?
That's
that?
4 months right there.
that's where it's supposed to come out, is that old debt, that number that I've been talking about off the water.
So there should be 210, 8,000, is what it should be coming out.
The only thing I was concerned right now was, I think it was 0210, let's see here, 6120, which is dues and restrictions. That's the only thing that I think I
What's in that account? Does anybody see it?
Which,
What do you say?
What's in that dues and subscriptions account?
It says 1,000, it's expected.
Yeah.
I don't, I mean, it should have been coming out of the same with the 8,700, the 210, 8,000. And then, but if there's $8,700 budget for that account, then we should be able to make 2 payments of 3,000, and then 2 months reevaluate and pull 2,700 from this account and 3,000 from this account to make.
we made, what did we make? We made we made a 3,000 payment in October, and a $3,000 payment in November.
It gives 3 months.
See where we're at?
If we can pull those.
We made a $3,000 payment in October, and a $3,000 payment in November. So you got 8,700 in that line item. So according to that, you got 2,700 left to use to pay 14,000.
So we need to put at least 300 in there tonight.
300?
300 give you another payment.
Am I misunderstanding something here? Did you say we split it between 3 departments for the?
We had a total.
Wait, hear me out first. We split the 26-1 between 3 different departments for the water, for the tower bill?
No, for debt,
Okay,
just
for
like
debt.
Mike said, for debt.
Oh, okay.
And I'll be honest, in my mind, it was all the water tower debt.
I got you.
Am I right?
Okay, I see where the mistake is now, okay, all right.
And we were before that, we started in what, July, paying 3,000? So that was the old fiscal year anyway. But where we stand right now, as I understand it, we applied 8,700 for the old debt on the water side, which is for the tower bill. So you made a 3,000 payment in October, or 3,000 payment in November, so that would leave you $2,700
So
on the line item.
to make the December payment, we have to at least put 300 into that account from one of the else. That gets us to the
Okay,
December.
all right, I
And
get it.
then we'll get the 3,000 later from.
Somewhere else.
You're saying just transfer enough to.
Or we could do 3,300 out of one of them,
And then
so
that
that's
was the one shot.
December, January's payment.
Gotcha.
I'm not opposed to that either.
And then we can reevaluate 2 months.
I'm not opposed to that at all.
I'll do the 300.
300.
So 300 or 3? I would do the 300. Okay.
I mean, it really, this doesn't take that long, we can reevaluate.
Right.
I'll be back here in December.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be come January, come
So
January.
let's do that, let's say,
Okay.
which one do we want to put back? Priority. Streets.
I think so.
That's yours.
Yeah, do it on
That's
streets.
which one we're gonna be plenty for.
Right. Right.
So we want 300 for the street.
What about the streets?
It's 310.
What's that?
410, 8,000.
That'd come out of what, 410, 8,000? Okay. Off the numbers off the budget.
And that was 300.
Yes.
Each man make a motion.
What about the other two?
Let's regroup on this. So we're gonna move $300 out of 410, 8,000. We're all in agreement on that.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna, on the legal fees, we're gonna move 70% admin, 30% court.
Okay.
And then the dumping fees, what is it? We want 92.
92,916.
I would rather for sure approximately run that.
Well, 7743 times 12 is $92,916.
Yeah.
So does that summarize it all?
What do you mean summarized?
Is that everything we need?
Yeah, I get to create a line item for that. Well, not create a line item, but to put that,
No, I do want to make sure just again, so that isn't the one we used before.
according to Jesse, dumping fee, 6130.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to the dumping fees, account number 6130, in the amount of 92,916. Legal fees, we'll move it to 70% admin, 30% court. And for the water, old debt, move $300 out of account 410,000. There's it all.
410, 8,000 is 210, 8,000.
Yes.
Right, sir.
I'll
You make
second.
that motion?
I'll second it.
And Ken?
Yes.
Manuel?
Yes.
Trevor Warren?
Yes.
Angel?
Yes.
And 4-0.
This time, take a 5-10 minute break and then come back in and call for closed session.
Yes. This time, 7:33.
Actually, we'll have to make a motion.
Do we have to make a motion to close session?
Oh,
Jack?
we've got to make a motion to,
Make a motion to
go
close
open in closed session. Jesse?
Are we ready?
Yep.
I was born ready. You ready, Robert?
I'm ready.
I'm Diane.
Make a motion to go out into closed.
Make a motion to go to closed session.
I'll second.
We got a first and a second.
Trevor made the motion, Mike seconded. You have to have a voice roll call?
I do. Ken?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Trevor Warren?
Yes.
Schultz?
Yes.
Passes 4-0. 7:24 p.m. We're closed session.
Second it.
Do that because
It's time to get out there.
Aye. Good advice.
Ready on. Somebody had a mic there.
I have a migraine.
somebody make a motion?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a second. Okay. And, Ken, please. Okay. At 8:12, adjourned.